BOTV Go app එක දැන්ම දාගන්න. BOTV Go SLT BOTV TV බලන හොඳම විදිහ.
Take him in. A complaint filed seeking the arrest of Minister Rishad Badiuddin. Shoulder to shoulder, Sri Lanka has a friend in its neighbour in the fight against terror.
Any threat to Sri Lanka is seen as a threat to India.
The bundle of relief. The government finalises the relief package for the tourism sector.
These have to be, of course, registered with the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority. If it has not been registered, it could be provisionally registered with them now.
Skepticism, however, prevails over recovery.
Right now, unfortunately, Sri Lanka has not managed the situation well enough.
Binet. Minister Sajid Premadasa wants to do away with the proposed Counter-Terrorism Act. All these stories and much more coming up on First at 9 this Friday, the 17th of May 2019.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9.
AdaDex ඇතුළත ඉදිමීම සමනය කරන අතර විනාඩි 5කින් ක්‍රියා කිරීම ආරම්භයි. AdaDex දිවියට නව දිරයක්. AdaDex වෙතින් එසේ කැක්කමට විශේෂඥයා AdaDex Headfast ඉක්මනට සහනය අදම අත්විඳින්න.
Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening and welcome to First at 9, AdaDerana 24, Sri Lanka's news channel. I'm Katharina Chang. Now on to our top story tonight. The Government Information Department lifted the temporary ban on WhatsApp, Viber and other social media platforms, including Facebook, earlier this evening. A communique issued by its Director General Nalaka Kaluwava, however, warned that legal action will be taken against those who spread rumours or false statements that may cause panic and incite violence among the public. According to the communique, such persons will be charged under emergency regulations. Meanwhile, 2 persons were arrested yesterday during a joint operation conducted by police and the Special Task Force in Horupatana. According to police, the 2 suspects had direct links with leader of the National Tawhid Jamaat, Zaharan Hashim.
The police and the Police Special Task Force conducted a joint search operation yesterday in the Virachole village located in the area of Pattava of Horupatana. 2 school principals who were taken into custody during the operation were found to have been in direct contact with leader of the National Tawhid Jamaat, Zaharan Hashim. The suspects were identified as principal of the Virasole Muslim Mahavidyalaya, Noor Mohammad Abdul Razool, and acting principal of Ataveeravava Muslim College, Mohammad Nijam. Both schools are in Anuradhapura. According to police, the 2 suspects travelled to Colombo frequently to assist Zaharan in plotting the attacks. The duo, who had vast knowledge on the group's future operations, also told police that Mohammad Ibrahim Insaf, who was one of the suicide bombers to carry out the Cinnamon Grand attack, along with Zaharan Hashim, vested them the responsibility to oversee the construction of a mosque in Pattava of Horupatana. The construction of the mosque, which is part of the NTJ, was funded by Mohammad Ibrahim Insaf. Meanwhile, the Kabitigol Magistrates Court allowed police to detain the suspects for 72 hours for further interrogations. They are currently in custody of the Horupatana police. Meanwhile, Colombo Additional Magistrate Priyantha Liyanage ordered Karupaiya Rajendran Abdullah, who was one of the employees at the copper factory owned by one of the suicide bombers, be further remanded. The OIC also informed court that Insaf Ahmed gifted 200,000 rupees for the wedding of Karupaiya Rajendran. Meanwhile, it was also revealed that 3 cheques, each worth rupees 2.5 million, were found in the suspect's possession during the arrest. Furthermore, one of the 3 employees of the copper factory in question, who went into hiding following the launch of investigations, were taken into custody in Mavanella recently. During the hearing, Colombo Additional Magistrate Priyantha Liyanage ordered that call records of 10 telephone numbers frequently contacted by the 9 employees of the copper factory who were arrested and then released on bail, as well as their bank records, be produced to court. Meanwhile, police media spokesperson SP Ruwan Gunasekara reiterated that stern action will be taken against those who misuse social media to spur conflict among communities.
A special unit in police headquarters conducting the monitoring part, and after that monitored informations will be forwarded to criminal investigation department for further investigations. A receipt of arrest will be given to the nearest relative of the individuals who were taken into police custody under emergency regulation. All the police stations have been informed about this, and when the suspects get released from police custody, the relevant receipt of arrest should be returned to the respective police station.
Indian High Commissioner to Sri Lanka Taranjit Singh Sandhu insists that the country stands shoulder to shoulder with their brothers and sisters in Sri Lanka in fighting the latest terror threat. Following an audience with the Chief Prelate of the Malwata chapter, Most Venerable Thimbatuave Sri Sumangala Thera yesterday, Sandhu insisted that any threat to the island nation will be seen as a threat to India.
Your guidance and leadership at this particular moment for people of Sri Lanka, people of India stand strongly shoulder to shoulder with their brothers and sisters in Sri Lanka in facing the threat from jihadi terror and ideology which we have recently seen in Sri Lanka. We have seen this situation and we see it as a joint threat to the people of Sri Lanka and the people of India. We will stand with Sri Lanka during this tough period, as always.
After his audience with the Chief Prelate, Indian High Commissioner Taranjit Singh Sandhu echoed his country's commitment to battle the latest terror threat in Sri Lanka.
We see it, any threat to Sri Lanka is seen as a threat to India, and we will fight this jihadi ideology and jihadi terror together, shoulder to shoulder with you.
The US says that it is committed to a sovereign Sri Lanka able to protect its security and prosperity. US Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Lena B. Teplitz, made the statement marking the handover of an 8 high-endurance cutter, a gift from the US Coast Guard to Sri Lanka Navy. Teplitz went on to say that the Indo-Pacific must remain free and open to all nations. The new vessel will be utilized by the Sri Lanka Navy for patrol and surveillance missions in the deep seas around Sri Lanka, providing maritime security and assistance to search and rescue operations. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe says that Sri Lanka does not require Sharia university. The Premier made this remark following a discussion held at the Prime Minister's office today on the proposed Madrasa Act. The Minister of Muslim Religious Affairs, M.H.A. Halim, representatives of the Attorney General's Department and other officials participated in the discussion. Following the discussion, the Premier said that amendments to the proposed Madrasa Act were discussed and a new draft will be submitted for Cabinet approval. President Maithripala Sirisena bemoans that terrorists may have succeeded in their goal as the country continues to ponder on terrorism instead of moving ahead. Addressing the National Vesak Festival held in Galle today, the head of state pledged to do everything possible to decimate terrorism. The president, meanwhile, was also confronted with a controversial request.
The State Vesak Festival was held at the Totagamu Ratpat Temple in Hikkadwa under the patronage of President Maithripala Sirisena. We most respectfully request the President to release Jnanasara Thera on the day of Vesak Poya along with 45 intelligence officials who were arrested. Sri Lankans, including state officials and school children, gave the pledge titled Bak Mahadurum on the 3rd of April against illicit narcotics. With the Easter Sunday attacks, people gradually forgot the importance of the pledge. People completely forgot that pledge and things the government did, such as the suggestion to make the the Tripitaka a world heritage. Therefore, the terrorists' attack was successful. We should decide whether we should keep pondering on terrorism or we are going to unite as a country. Whatever allegations are levelled against myself and the government, we will do what we should do as a government. Lies spread across the country fast. People are agitated when they watch news at night, and it shows the deterioration of media. Our media organizations do not want to unite all the people during such a situation. I think the only solution for this state of mind is the Buddhist philosophy. We have done everything to curb terrorism as a government.
මේ රටේ ත්‍රස්තවාදය තුරන් කරන්න අපි රජයක් විදියට ගත හැකි සෑම දෙයක්ම අපි කළා.
Indian media today reported that Adil Amiz, who was arrested over Easter Sunday attacks, was also suspected handler of two operatives arrested by Gujarat Anti-Terrorist Squad 2 years ago. 24-year-old Adil was an employee of Virtusa Corporation in Colombo. Quoting Indian authorities, the media reports says that phone recordings between Adil and the two Indian operatives revealed that they spoke of an attack in Sri Lanka.
Indian news outlet DNA Today revealed that arrested 24-year-old Adil Amiz, who was an employee of Virtusa Corporation in Colombo over the Easter Sunday attacks, was also a suspected handler of two IS operatives arrested by Gujarat Anti-Terrorist Squad 2 years ago. It reports that according to officials of the anti-terrorism squad in India, two suspects identified as Mohammad Qasim Stimbawala, a laboratory technician in a hospital in Ankleshwar, and Ubaid Ahmed Mirza, a practicing lawyer in Surat, were arrested on 25th of October in 2017. The duo is reported to have planned a lone wolf attack on a synagogue in Ahmedabad. Officials of the anti-terrorism squad in India have also told the news portal that they recovered several WhatsApp chats and telephonic call records of suspects where Ubaid Miraz had spoken about Adil Amiz based in Sri Lanka, and in the chat, Adil was identified as an ISIS handler and a person who could take up the cause of jihad. A senior official of the squad has said, quote, "We have recovered one of the recordings of Ubaid in which he had taken the name of Adil Amiz. They were also bragging about assassinating the Prime Minister in Tamil Nadu and had also talked about carrying out an attack in Sri Lanka," unquote.
The Deputy Leader of the United National Party, Minister Sajid Premadasu, today dealt a blow to the government's plans to introduce the Counter-Terrorism Act. Speaking at a function held in Ampara, the minister insisted that the Tried and Tested Prevention Act, which enabled the defeat of 30-year-long terrorism in the country, should be retained. He was also of the view that democracy and human rights should take a back seat given the prevailing situation in the country.
Without debate, the proposed Counter-Terrorism Act has inclusions to curb terrorism, and it also pays attention to human rights. However, I believe that we should stop thinking about it since global terrorism has entered Sri Lanka. We should adhere to the Prevention of Terrorism Act, which helped us beat 30-year-long terrorism in the country. I think we should give prominence in the national agenda to beat terrorism and national security and consider democracy and human rights to be secondary. There is no use in protecting democracy and human rights if we put national security at stake. National security can't be safeguarded through the Counter-Terrorism Act.
General Secretary of the Sri Lanka Communist Party, D.W. Gunasekara, fears that the current discourse where Muslim communities are harassed will push the Islamic community as a whole to a corner, giving rise to an Islamic State, which is a dream of the so-called IS. Speaking at a media briefing held in Colombo today, Gunasekara also warned that there might well be a refugee situation born within the country.
Bear in mind that we must draw experiences of Middle East, and such that if we are unable to control this situation, there will be refugees within the country. If they can't go abroad, those who can afford, they will run abroad. Other poor people, the poor Muslims may go congregate in the eastern.
On to other local news. Minister of Industry and Commerce Rishad Badiuddin today gave clarification on why he contacted the commander of the army over arrest of a terrorist suspect. Lieutenant General Mahesh Senanaik revealed yesterday that the minister contacted him on 3 occasions asking what can be done about the arrest of the East attack suspect. The army commander comments, however, prompted the organization, dubbed Truth Seekers, to file a complaint at the police headquarters seeking the Minister Badiuddin's arrest.
Speaking at a media briefing yesterday, the commander of the army, Lieutenant General Mahesh Senanayake, elaborated on a remark he previously made to a newspaper regarding several phone calls made by Minister Rishad Badiuddin over the arrest of a suspect pertaining to the Easter bombings. Commander Senanayake said that Minister Badiuddin called him 3 times and asked the commander as to what can be done over the suspect's detention. Accordingly, AdaDerana inquired Minister Badiuddin on the remarks made by the army commander. In reply, the minister said that the phone call was only made upon the request of a senior advisor to the Ministry of Muslim Religious Affairs to check whether his son was arrested by the army, since the police had denied arresting him. In the meantime, the organization dubbed Truth Seekers lodged a complaint with the police headquarters today, stating that Minister Rishad Badiuddin should be arrested for aiding and abetting terrorism, as attempted to secure the release of terror suspects by exerting pressure while being in office.
Now, speaking at a media briefing held in Colombo today, General Secretary of the Sri Lanka Communist Party, D.W. Gunasekara, fears that the current discourse where Muslim communities are harassed will push the Islamic community as a whole to a corner, giving rise to an Islamic State, which is the dream of the so-called IS.
Bear in mind that we must draw experiences of Middle East, and such that if we are unable to control the situation, there will be refugees within the country. If they can't go abroad, those who can afford, they will run abroad. Other poor people, the Muslims may go congregate in the eastern province where the majority live. That is a tendency, natural tendency. You can't blame them. In search of security, they will go there. And the Sinhalese people who are there, they will, through fear, they might leave the place and come out to the other place, other provinces. As a result, you will be provided in a situation where new state, so-called Islamic State, will be born in the eastern province, as anticipated, as dreamt by ISIS. So therefore, main thing is to hold your tongue. Allow the armed forces to handle the situation. If at least the politician can keep quiet for 1 week, then of course security forces, they will perform their job. Our foreign minister is again in negotiations in America, having talks with the Secretary of State, Pompeo. I don't know what he is going to discuss. We want to make it quite clear, no country should interfere into our affairs. As far as the foreign policy and defense policy is concerned, at the high time that all the political parties come to a consensus on the foreign policy. You can't allow parties to change their foreign policies to suit their needs.
And with that, we cross over to a short commercial break, but make sure you stay tuned as we have more local news on the other side.
You are watching Sri Lanka's #1 news channel. This is AdaDerana 24.
The International Monetary Fund intends to hold its forecast for Sri Lanka's 2019 economic growth at 3.5% in spite of devastating Easter bombings. It also insists that it is too early to assess the financial damage stemming from the terror attacks. The economy grew 3.2% last year, the weakest in 17 years, as a weeks-long political impasse and monetary policy tightening sapped business confidence and cooled investment. Speaking to journalists yesterday, the IMF added that they remain positive of Sri Lanka's debt repayment capacity, but forecast Sri Lanka's budget and current account deficits to widen this year.
The International Monetary Fund yesterday said it was keeping Sri Lanka's growth projection of 3.5% unchanged despite the Easter Sunday attacks. During a teleconference with journalists in Colombo yesterday, IMF's mission chief for Sri Lanka, Manuela Goretti, said the growth projection will remain unchanged owing to a lack of new official data and clear information to assess the impact on growth of the Easter bombings. Goretti was quoted saying it will be speculative to revise the IMF's growth projection at this juncture, unquote. Still, the fund said Sri Lanka's budget and current account deficits could widen more than expected because of the bombings, but did not prove fresh estimates. Previously, the IMF said it expected that this year's fiscal deficit would fall to 4.5% of gross domestic product from last year's 5.3% and the current account deficit to 2.8% from 3.2% in 2018. Meanwhile, the IMF's projects growth to reach 5% in the medium term, supported by the government's reform efforts. The IMF pointed out sustained revenue mobilization will be needed going forward to place public debt on a downward path, supported by stronger fiscal rules and the recently launched medium debt strategy. The fund also pointed out that reforms of state-owned enterprises would also help mitigate fiscal risks. The IMF also remained positive of Sri Lanka's debt payment capacity, as immediately after the attacks, market pressure in the country has remained contained. They stated that the next debt repayment is only due in October 2020 and they don't see any major risk at this point, given the profile of maturities and profiles of market conditions.
Now, following much deliberation, the tourism and banking industries yesterday reached consensus over the relief package for the tourism industry. Speaking to First at 9, State Minister of Finance AdaDerana said that the moratorium on capital and interest repayment for 1 year will be availed to those who have registered with the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority. Meanwhile, President of the Hotel Association of Sri Lanka, Sanath Ukwata, however, was unimpressed with the government's handling of the country's security situation, insisting that the crisis should be resolved to have any chance of getting the travel bans imposed on Sri Lanka lifted.
A meeting was held between the government's central bank officials and industry leaders yesterday to iron out concerns pertaining to the tourism relief package. Among the proposals in the package is the reduction of VAT from existing 15% to 5% for hotels and tour operators until the 31st of March next year. The package also includes a moratorium on capital and interest payment for 1 year for loans taken by the industry. During the meeting yesterday, the banks agreed that they will do away with case-by-case basis approach in deciding the 1-year moratorium on capital and interest repayment on all performing facilities, but opt for eligible and approved or registered travel and tourism businesses. Speaking to First at 9, State Minister of Finance Derana elaborated on the conditions that need to be met to be availed the moratorium.
And when you look at the case studies from the US to Europe to Asia, it's taken between 1 to 3 years for recovery. We are working on a plan so that we would have the shortest possible time for recovery. For those who have taken loans from maybe banks, non-bank financial institutions, leasing companies, we have given them a moratorium. That is that they don't have to pay their capital and interest payments till the financial year closes in March. After that, those payments could be made. That's to ease their working capital requirements and the cash flow. In addition, under Enterprise Sri Lanka, we have also provided working capital loans at very subsidized interest rates, where the government will pick the interest rate subsidy of about 75%. This goes for big hotels, boutique hotels, small hotels, resort hotels, homestays. These have to be, of course, registered with the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority. If it has not been registered, it could be provisionally registered with them now, but they have to prove that they are tourism related. That means they must be registered with the local council, can be the Pradesh Sabha, the urban council or the municipal council.
While welcoming the agreement that was reached yesterday, speaking to First at 9, President of the Hotel Association of Sri Lanka, Sanath Ukwata, however, said that much more is needed to be done if countries are to soften its travel bans imposed on Sri Lanka.
Right now, unfortunately, Sri Lanka has not managed the situation well enough. There are mobs who are attacking this Muslim community around the country, and which does not deliver the required results for us to soften the travel advisory and travel ban. So as a result, we are still in the same position right now. We have not improved at all with regards to getting this travel advisory softened.
A renowned British scholar believes that the trade bullying of the United States is to cloak its fear of the development and rise of developing countries. Martin Jacques, British scholar and also author of the international bestseller When China Rules the World, says that the US bullying is deeply rooted and its extreme conceitedness has led to their thinking that bullying is a matter of course. He says that US is not welcoming of any sort of modernity outside Western culture.
There is only one form of modernity. It is Western modernity and all the various arrangements, political, cultural, economic, that go with it. Everyone else should be like us. This is a very deep American mentality. America now feels under threat. They recognize now that the rise of China threat the ascendancy and supremacy of the United, and they want to try and stop this. They want the world to be shaped by and ruled over by the United States. And this new aggressive mentality is a reaction to American decline. And clearly part of the way the United States is behaving over the trade war is to bully China. And of course China is going to resist that. The framework of the way these things work is changing. I mean, the United States has stepped outside the international, the rules that have been that it previously in large measure operated by, and it's rejecting them, and it's saying America first, whereas WTO depends fundamentally on multilateralism. So the WTO in that situation is relegated to a much lesser role with less authority.
The Osha Price Index closed higher for a second straight session today, moving further away from a near 7-year closing low hit earlier this week as local investors bought beaten down stocks. The Osha Price Index ended 0.15% firmer at 5,259.71. Turnover was 1.4 billion rupees more than this year's daily average of around 565.2 million rupees. Foreign investors sold a net 997.3 million rupees worth of shares today, extending the year-to-date net foreign outflow to 5.7 billion rupees worth of equities. We now have Christina Ponzo from NDB Securities with a full report on how the markets performed during the week.
During the week, the ASPI lost 1.3%, mainly due to price losses in counters such as Ceylon Tobacco Company, Hatton National Bank and DFCC Bank. Meanwhile, the S&P SL20 decreased by 2.9%. The average daily turnover for the week was up from last week to 617 million rupees. Diversified sector recorded the highest sector turnover during the week. Out of the weekly turnover, crossings accounted for nearly 28.8%, which was a significantly higher proportion than last week.
The rupee ended steady at 175 rupees and 90 cents to 176 rupees and 10 cents per US dollar in dull trade. Analysts expect the currency to weaken as money flows out of stocks and government securities. The rupee, however, gained 0.1% this week and is up 3.9% for the year. Let's now take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee traded against other currencies during the day. Well, we have international news right after this commercial break, so make sure you stay tuned.
You are watching Sri Lanka's #1 news channel. This is AdaDerana 24.
Welcome back to the news. Taiwan's parliament has become the first in Asia to legalize same-sex marriage following a vote today. In 2017, the island's constitutional court ruled that same-sex couples had the right to legally marry. Parliament was given a 2-year deadline and was required to pass the changes by the 24th of May. Lawmakers debated 3 different bills to legalize same-sex unions, and the government's bill, the most progressive of the 3, was passed. Conservative opponents, however, were angered by the vote. Jeremy Corbyn says talks with the government to find a compromise over Brexit have gone as far as they can. In a letter to the PM, the Labour leader says the 6 weeks of cross-party discussions could not carry on due to the increasing weakness and instability of the government. Number 10 said progress had been made in some areas, but the talks had been very challenging. The parties are now expected to discuss putting a number of options to parliamentarians. The Prime Minister has promised to set a timetable for leaving Downing Street following a Brexit vote next month. Environment Secretary Michael Gove says that MPs need to focus on making sure that they honour the mandate of leaving the EU given by the 2016 referendum. It was a hectic day at the Italian Open yesterday, with some players having to play 2 matches on the day as the entire Wednesday was rained off. Roger Federer looked rusty on court but battled back to win, saving match points. But it wasn't the mastery on the display that made headlines, but the tantrums of mercurial talent Nick Kyrgios.
Nick Kyrgios was defaulted from his second-round Italian Open clash against Norway's Casper Ruud yesterday after the hot-headed Australian hurled a chair onto the court. World number 36 Kyrgios, who was broken in the third set, threw his racket to the floor before kicking a water bottle and flinging a chair towards the centre of the court. Ruud was leading 6-3, 6-7, 2-1 when Kyrgios was disqualified. Action at the Italian Open was not limited to Kyrgios' antics, as Roger Federer saved a disastrous start and match points to beat Borna Coric and reach the quarter-finals. The Swiss won 2-6, 6-4, 7-6 to advance into the last 8. With an entire Wednesday being lost to rain, players had to play extra matches to get back on schedule. Second seed Rafael Nadal blew away Frenchman Jeremy Chardy 6-love, 6-1 earlier in the day before breezing past Georgian Basilashvili 6-1, 6-0. In the meantime, Novak Djokovic, the tournament's top seed, brushed aside Denis Shapovalov 6-1, 6-3, followed by a 6-3, 6-love destruction of Philipp Kohlschreiber in the late match on centre court at the Italian Open.
And with that, we conclude this edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining us and have a pleasant evening.